Welcome to another tutorial video in which we will be editing this image. This is our starting point, and this is where we ended up, and as you can see, we will go through many steps to get here. If you have already watched my tutorial videos aimed more at advanced users, these techniques will be familiar to you. Here are the 3 files we'll be working with. Download them and follow along with every step I'm about to show you in this course. So I'm going to drag them all into Photoshop at once. And since these are raw files, Camera Raw will open. So we have 3 images, and to be honest, we would only need 2 of them. This one is optional, and I only included it so you can better understand the logic and we can slightly improve the quality with it. Honestly, it might not be worth the effort. Nevertheless, the technique is basically typically done with 3 images. I take the first photo after sunset, but while there is still plenty of natural light, so that we have a lot of detail in every part of the image. Then I take another one significantly later, when the city lights have become dominant. If you look, here the city lights are already on, but there is still so much natural light that we can't see them. And here, we're much later in time, I take the photo so that the city lights are dominant. However, at this point, as you can see here in the red areas, this is how you can turn them on and off. You can see that some areas are blown out, so this part is overexposed, which means we need to take an underexposed photo to fix these areas. That's why you need the 3 photos. 1 photo for the nice details, 1 for the city lights, and another to save the highlights. So let's take a look at the settings. At the top right, you can see that I took the first photo with ISO 100, f8 and a half second exposure. Since we don't have a very close foreground, I was able to use f8. You may have already learned this in the basics course. The settings for the later photo are also ISO 100 and f8. But now, with a 30-second exposure. Without any trick, this is the maximum shutter speed most cameras allow, which is why I set it to this. For good quality, we need the lowest possible ISO, and we can compensate with the aperture value and shutter speed. Since I was just able to properly expose the scene with the shutter speed here, I didn't need to adjust the aperture. I took this one right after, and if you look, the ISO is the same, the f-stop is the same, but the exposure time is only 1 second, so it's very underexposed. The main point is that the highlights should not be blown out. And one more thing, if you look, the water here doesn't look good, so with a longer shutter speed, like a half-second exposure, the water looks much better. That's why this will be our base image, which we're going to edit now. And we'll match the other 2 to this one. So let's get started. Profile. Adobe Landscape, Auto. Reset the blacks. And reset the colors. We need to correct the white balance because the image is very, very cool toned. And to see this better, I'll just raise the shadows a bit here, just so we can see the colors more clearly. So I need to set this a bit warmer. Maybe pull back a little on the magenta. The goal is for the colors to look natural. So for an evening shot, you can go for those cold, bluish tones. But I don't want our scene to look unrealistically blue, so I think this looks pretty good here. Temperature is 8,300. Tint is 16. We can move on. Details. So if I hold down Option and drag the masking slider, we only sharpen where it's necessary. We're good at a value of 80. The image isn't noisy to begin with, so we don't need Denoise here. Next, optics. It's already set for us automatically. It recognized my Sony camera. We'll also enable chromatic aberration correction, and at the very bottom, we'll slide the lowest slider a bit to the right. And if you take a look, it really nicely brings out our warm and cool colors. And as we've already learned before, there's something called color contrast, and this is very important for us, especially in landscape photos. So the contrast between warm and cool colors can really add a lot to the image. Let's say I set it to a value around 40 or 45, maybe 45. will be good. Typically, it oversaturates the blues. So at this point, we go back to the color mixer, saturation, blue, and bring it down a bit. Maybe with a value around 15, or perhaps closer to 20, so that our blue tones look more natural. Maybe that's still a bit much, minus 15. Okay, we're done though. Maybe I'll come back here for a moment. And there's one thing we need to keep in mind here. When we're working with multiple images, it's a good idea to create an image that's not too contrasty. If we make images that aren't very contrasty, stitch them together, and then add contrast afterwards, the end result will look much more natural. So I'm setting the contrast to 0. I'll raise the shadows a little bit more and bring down the whites a bit, so that our image won't be so high in contrast, so we're pretty much good here. We can definitely copy these settings over to this image. So, the bottom one is selected. I hold down Shift and click over here. 3 dots, Sync Settings, Check All. Okay. And now we have the same settings, but since we used a shorter shutter speed, this image is much darker. Now we need to do the technique called matching. So all we have to do is brighten this image enough so that it resembles this photo. We're pretty much there. It can be just a little bit darker than that. And it's very, very important that we edit it in such a way that the highlights don't get blown out. So I'll pull the highlights all the way down, lower the whites, bring the shadows all the way up, and reduce the exposure until I can save the highlights here. And since the image has now become too dark, I still need to brighten it up. So I'll bring up the blacks. So it's okay if this is a little darker than the other one, but it can't be much darker. Maybe I dare to go a bit higher here and save the whites. Something like this. A bit lower with the blacks. Good. We're more or less good. At first glance, you might say, why don't we just edit this photo, since the highlights aren't blown out, and it looks good? But actually that's not true, because our image is very, very noisy. One thing is certain though, the sky looks best in this photo. Here, I don't like it that much because of the long exposure time. Here it looks much better, but it's very noisy. And while we can't perfectly recover such tiny details, we can make nice uniform surfaces, like the sky and the water, beautifully noise-free if we come here to the Details tab and click on this Denoise. This is usually set to 50 by default. For me, that's almost always too much. So I usually lower it to 40. And now if you look, it beautifully denoises our image. So I click on Enhanced, and at this point it creates a copy of it. Here you can see that a DNG file is being created, which is saved next to the original file. While this is being processed, let's edit the last photo. So here we should do something similar to this, can try to sync the settings here as well. But we probably won't be able to use them effectively, since the photo was taken at a very different time and under very different lighting conditions. So we need to come up here and adjust this a little bit. Maybe if I zoom in here and try to set the white balance here, let's see. We're going to use the city lights from this image and from this image. And for the darker areas, we'll try to recover them from this image. And here, I really need to make sure that the colors and the white balance are very similar between this area and this area. So you can see that here, it's much cooler. So here as well, we need to go in a much cooler direction. And it's also certain that we don't need that much detail, so I'm going to lower the shadows. Let's bring it down a bit more, like this. So you can see that the details are nicer here than here, and they're quite nice here as well. So really, in fact, 2 images would be enough for this location, but let's be professionals and try to save those parts as well. So we finished editing our 3 images, so we can open them in Photoshop. And we'll definitely need this one. This is the enhanced one. You can tell because it says enhanced at the top here, and the original doesn't have that, so we don't need the original. So that's one. So I hold down Command, click on this one, 2 and 3, and then click Open. At this point, Photoshop opens our images on 3 separate layers. You need to choose the base photo you want to have at the bottom, and then you can drag the others onto it. So I grab this image. While holding down Shift, release it, and then it centers it. I grab this image, and while holding Shift, I release it, then right-click here. Close others. Don't save, don't save. Okay, and we're done. Let's name our images. So this will be the main photo. Main photo. This is the highlights. And this right here is the area of the shadows. Let's maybe go ahead and start with the shadows. That might be a bit simpler. So the first mistake I made here is that a lot of time passed between the 2 shots, and I probably moved the camera a little. So, even though the camera was on a tripod, and the image stabilizer is always turned off for exactly this reason, to avoid any movement. But that doesn't mean that on grassy, earthy ground it won't move a little, especially over the course of, say, an hour. And as I turn it on and off, you can see that the buildings shift relative to each other, and now they're off by a few pixels. There are 2 ways to fix this. One way is to select the images you want to align. Edit. And here you have something called Auto Align Layers. And sometimes it does a good job, sometimes it doesn't. With this image, it completely fails, so we have to do it manually. So the top layer is turned off, 2 layers are visible, and for the upper of the visible layers, I change the blending mode to difference. And at this point, these kinds of auras appear. Here you can also see that we have this whitish aura. And if we can get rid of it, we can align our images with each other much better. And here I zoom in on our buildings. It's clearly visible here as well. I select the Move tool, and this layer is selected. I click here, and with the arrow keys, I can move the cursor up and down, and I need to align it so that these auras, both the dark and the light ones, disappear as much as possible. And as you can see, it has disappeared from here as well. So we've done a pretty good job. I'll set it back to normal. Actually, I shouldn't have set it to normal because we have this option here called Lighten. So I select Lighten, and now the city lights come through. But of course, whatever is brighter on this layer will also appear here. So if I zoom in here and look at the details, I can turn this off and on. Then you can see that our nice lights and extra details appear here. And this is what we're trying to save a little bit here. So first I'll give it a black mask and use a brush with white color. Let this be a completely soft brush. And the opacity can even go up to 100% and use a much smaller brush. Actually, sorry, it can be a bit bigger than that. And if you look now, when I paint here with the brush, these nice details start to appear. You can see it there. However, if I go just a tiny bit too far here, the water appears, which doesn't look good. It's worth selecting this layer quick selection tool. We select this peninsula. I hold down Shift and select this part as well. There, a little bit further out. And that's about it. Maybe I'll take out a little bit here as well. And now we will only be able to do anything within the selection. So if I go back here to the mask, the brush is here. And whatever I do here, nothing happens. But here, I can bring back our beautiful details as well. If you look, I can restore those beautiful details here too. Okay, with Command D, we remove the selection, we come in here, and when I toggle it on and off, you can see that here at the water, we also did something. That doesn't look good, right? So it's worth switching to a black brush and erasing it, where we definitely don't want that layer to appear. All right, just a bit here. And before, after, looks good. As I mentioned earlier, this layer is a bit unnecessary now, because basically the photo underneath is of very high quality. All right, I'll zoom out like this. And now let's fix the city's highlights. So here we have something called highlights. Now I'll turn this on. We learned in the advanced course that there's a technique called blend if. If you double click here on the empty area, you'll get blending options, and here you need to drag the left slider to the right, but only its right half. So if you hold down Option on Mac, you can drag only the right half. And now I'll click OK. And now what happened is, if we zoom in and look at the highlights, you can see that they look much better. So the blown out areas are not as overexposed anymore. And here you can clearly see that our highlights are really blown out here, but over here, they're not. However, we also need to mask here, because if you look closely, the image doesn't look good in every area. Here as well, if we look at the water, here's a before, here's an after, and all sorts of textures come back onto the water, which we might not necessarily want. So we'll give it a black mask first. I'll turn it back on. Now, of course, nothing is visible from it. I'll lower the opacity, let's say, to around 20, smaller brush. And now if we go over with white color, if we go over here, then only on these parts that are really blown out. We click a few times there, and our highlights come back. As you can see, we can very nicely recover these blown out areas. You don't have to be very precise, since thanks to the blend if technique, we basically already have a mask that protects our original image. Let's check it here as well. Okay. A bit bigger. You shouldn't pull it back too much, because if you look, unfortunately, the texture of the water also comes back, so just be careful. Roughly like this, it looks good. It looks good here too. This is going to be a very fiddly job now, so this might be boring. However, this part is very spectacular. It's definitely worth doing this, and you should spend more time on it than I will here in the course, because it really is a time-consuming task, and right now the main point is just to teach you, but I won't be as precise as I would be if I were preparing this photo for myself. And you also need to pay attention to things like, for example, here, if a car passed by here, and if a light source isn't present in both images, then it will look really bad. You won't be able to fix that with this method, so it's better to just leave those areas alone, even if they're blown out. Only fix those areas where there was light present in both layers. Okay, let's check here as well. I'll move up a bit so I don't have to go over it so many times. Let's say a value of 40. All right. There too. I'm going to speed up this part now. You understand the task. This is what you need to do after me. And that's pretty much it. As I said, I won't be super precise now, but if we zoom in on the image here, you can see there's a before and here's an after. Beautiful. We've nicely saved our highlights. Thank God the first photo was already exposed quite well, so there really wasn't much work to do here. And let's also add that I have a pretty good camera, so it's an expensive one. And not everyone has a camera like this. However, if you're shooting with a less advanced camera or a phone, this technique will be like magic for you. I'll show you one more thing. Here's a boat, for example, and if you look, the boat was moving, rocking on the water. So you also have to pay attention to avoid this ghost effect on moving objects. So in this case, I'll definitely remove it. And here we don't correct anything in the highlights. It's better to let them blow out. With a smaller brush, we can make corrections next to it here. All right, we're done. So I'll put these 3 images into a folder and name it blend. So the next step is to make area-specific adjustments. Maybe let's start with the cleanup, so a new layer called cleanup. I select the spot healing brush and come down here to the bottom. So here there's light, which I don't really know what it is, so we'll remove that. And here, we're good. And here, I don't like it when something is right at the edge of the picture and sticks in, so let's remove that as well. So I go over this with a larger, soft-edged brush, and it did a pretty good job. I'll touch it up just a little bit. But I think we're good like this. Okay, that's about it for the retouching, as I see it. Next, oh, I almost forgot, we need to replace the sky. So here in Blend, we know that our sky is on this layer, the one we want to use. So I'll duplicate this. I'll delete the mask and we need to reset the blending. So I click here twice, drag this back, move this black slider over there and this one here. And now, of course, we need to mask out the sky from here. Gradient tool. From white to black. You can select it here if you don't see it. And from here, with a gentle gradient, I paint over the top layer. So this is pretty much good like this. I definitely want to mask out this area. So let's select this layer. Let's say we select this area. And back here to the mask. Brush Batio black color, 100%. And I definitely don't want to bring that layer into this area. In fact, not even here, for sure. That's fine like this. So now we have a before and after. Our sky is in there. It's a bit dark. So it would be worth correcting this. I select this layer and create a curve layer above it. And here there's something called clipping mask, because right now, whatever I do with this, the whole image will get lighter or darker. But if I press this button, then this will only affect the layer directly below it. So now I can lighten or darken it, and we're only affecting that layer. So I'll brighten it just a tiny bit, so it's in sync with the layer below. Let's take a look. So before, after. It looks great. I think this sky is much better. So we've got the blend. We've got the cleanup. Next, let's make some area-specific adjustments. Let's bring out, for example, this little church on the hill and this part here a bit. Of course, the simplest way to do this is with channel masks. I come in here and check the red, green, and blue channels, and we can also look at the RGB. Command plus click. I create a new mask with RGB. And Command plus D. I deselect, and now we can also see the RGB. So red, green, blue, RGB. The blue is good for us here because of the road. The green might be even better, and the red. So basically, the red is very nice here. Very beautiful and high contrast. But of course, the city lights are also very dominant because they are yellowish in color. So it might be better to choose the green instead, because that way it will be much easier to mask out this part and this one too. So Command plus click. And on a new layer, curves. And at this point, a mask is created from the selection, and this is the mask we need to modify. So I come up here with the mask selected, I go up here to Image, Adjustments, Curves. And now, whatever I do here will only affect the mask, so nothing visibly happens to the image. However, if we go into the mask, we can actually see what we're doing. Option plus click. And once again, Image, Adjustments, Curves. So now our task is to increase the contrast until we clearly select the lighter areas here, meaning the dark parts should become darker. And the light parts should become lighter. Roughly, like this. And with this first one, we're only going to modify the church, and just the church hill. So I come over here to this curve box, double click on it, and here I brighten it up. I'm not looking at the water, I'm not looking at the city lights, I'm only focusing on the hill, and I bring it up a bit here. We can also warm it up a little. So if we decrease the blue, as we've learned, increasing blue makes it bluer, decreasing it makes it more yellow. So I want it to have a slightly warmer color, and it's the same with the green. If I decrease the green, it will become a bit more purplish, and then it will look more like the city lights are being cast there and coloring that hill a bit more. So right now our image looks pretty bad, so we have no choice but to put this into a folder and give the folder a black mask. Option plus click on the mask, and this will be the church hill. And as we've already learned, we need to select a layer where the whole image is clearly visible. Let's say this one. Selection. We select the area task we want to work on. So now this hill with the church. We come back here to the mask while the selection is active. And of course, at this point, we can't do anything on the outside area. I switch to white color. We can't do anything except affect what's inside this selection. So now I'll zoom in here more closely, use a smaller brush, and carefully paint in here to bring this hill to life a bit. I want it to be much more striking. That's roughly okay like this. The building might be a bit too bright, but I'll deselect now with Command plus D and see if we need to adjust it or not. Yes, this might be a bit too strong. So with a black brush, we lower the opacity and soften it a bit here. Good. It looks good. Okay, so we've enhanced this hill a little, and now we can tackle this hill as well. Channel. If I remember correctly, green worked well for us. Or blue. Let's try blue this time. Here, our light, meaning the city lights, has the least presence. Command plus click, and here on a new layer, curves, and option plus click on the mask to see the mask, and of course we'll adjust the mask a bit with the adjustment. Curves. So here too, we'll increase the contrast. So I'm darkening the dark areas and brightening the light areas. Something like this. This is pretty much good enough. Once we're done with this, we double click on this curve here, and now we'll brighten up that area a bit. So again, I'm not looking at the rest of the landscape, just this peninsula. We'll brighten it up a little. So we can actually add a bit of contrast to it as well. So the usual S-shaped curve. And we can even warm it up again. So I come here to blue. I lower the blue channel, and I also lower the green channel a little bit, but just very, very carefully, so that part doesn't accidentally get a purple tint. All right. And now we've already learned to put this into a folder and give it a black mask. Option plus click. And this is the peninsula. We select this layer, selection, and I select our peninsula so that we absolutely can't make a mistake. Mask, brush, white color. Increase the opacity. And now if you paint here, our modifications will appear. There won't be a huge difference here. So I'm not going to put too much effort into it. That area is basically good quality anyway. So overall it looks pretty good. This should be enough. Maybe at Churchill this modification made more sense, so we were really able to enhance it a bit. This part already looks pretty good by default, so it's absolutely optional whether you want to do this step or not. Okay, our whole photo is more or less put together now. Now we need to make a copy of the whole thing, which can be done with the Shift Option Command E shortcut, or by selecting all the layers, duplicating them, and then, with all the copies still selected, right-click and choosing Merge Layers. Basically, the same thing happened. We'll name this layer Camera Raw Filter, and open it by going to Filter, then Camera Raw Filter. And now we're going to edit this image. The process is almost always very similar. One of the first steps is to select the area that's most important to us, which in this case is the city and the harbor. Something like this. Everything outside of this area we want to darken. So right now we're affecting the inner part, but if I press this button, the mask will invert and we can darken the outer areas. I'll lower it by half a stop. And if you look at our histogram here, you can see that the image appears a bit underexposed, but that's misleading because we still have some pixels there. So let's try to fix that first. We come here to curves, and we've learned that if there's an empty area here, we can move inwards and shift our pixels in that direction. However, these areas here would probably get blown out, so we need to zoom in, and we can see that they turn red. If it's not red for you, you can turn it on or off here. So, under no circumstances can we go higher there. But we can brighten the whole thing a little bit. So I pull it up here, and just slightly pull it down here at the bottom. So this is a very, very gentle S-curve, if you look at it. So with this, we've added nice contrast to the image and brightened the midtones a bit, which is where most of the pixels are. And if you look, here is a before and after. So this little bit of contrast really helped, and we're still a little bit blown out there. So carefully, I'm pulling it back here so we don't get blown out. So you can see that we have this S shape here, and we've pretty much saved our highlights. So this looks good. And if you pull it down just a tiny, tiny bit more here, but really just a very, very little, then you can be sure that nothing will get blown out. like this. And if you pull it up just a tiny bit here, then nothing will be completely black there either. This is important because if you want to upload images to stock sites, the algorithm often filters out photos where too many areas are blown out. And with this little trick, by pulling this down, you can somewhat get around that. Okay, we're pretty much good here. Let's continue with adjustments that affect specific areas. I'll come back here to the masks. For example, this part stands out to me a lot. There are different lights here than here, and this light is much more natural. Here it's a bit ugly, so let's fix it. Radial gradient. I select this area, go down a bit, and here I move towards the more yellowish direction, and also lower the saturation just a tiny bit. This is already pretty good. Maybe we can go a bit lower here as well. And the main point is to counterbalance this ugly orange color to some extent. I think roughly like this. This looks good. And here, you can see a before and after. You can see that the orange color has nicely disappeared there, at least to some extent. Next, a new linear gradient. And we drag it down from the top onto the sky and darken the whole sky a little bit. So I don't want the sky to be this bright, so I'm going to bring it down a bit. Minus 0.3. Another layer, and just here on this upper part, a separate one. A little bit darker still, let's say minus 0.6. Something like that. I should do something similar at the bottom as well. So another linear gradient. Something like this, I'll pull it down a bit, lower the exposure. So we're nicely directing the attention to this inner part. That's the plan, and maybe I would definitely darken this area a little. So, radial gradient. I'll select this area where I want it darker, but I don't want to go too far. So if I lower the exposure now, the sky there will also get darker and it'll look unnatural. So here we have something like this, a subtract and sky. And if you look closely, it very nicely removed that part because now it won't touch the upper area. So now we can darken it a bit. So that part isn't so bright. I don't even know why that area was so bright in the first place. Maybe we can increase the contrast a little more. And that's about it. So here's a before and here's an after. There's really not much else we need to do here because we did a good job in Photoshop. Maybe I'd add a little something to the whole image. Just a bit of clarity in the effects, but not too much. Let's say a value of plus 10 or 12. And we'll compensate for the highlights so they don't become too contrasty. Let's make it 12. I'll zoom in a bit. Here's the before, here's the after. We're looking good. So now that we're done with this, I'll show you another trick. We'll duplicate this layer and I'll name it Orton Effect. There are 100 different ways to create the Orton Effect. I'm going to show you the simplest one, which is the one I use most often. So the point is that we want to blur the highlights, these city lights, just a little bit. We want to achieve a sort of mirage effect, as if they're glowing. It's very simple to do this. We go up here to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and set it to a value roughly equal to the number of megapixels of our camera. So my camera is 24 megapixels. And I usually go just a little above that, so a value of around 28 works well here. Then we hit OK, and as you can see, now we have a blurry image. And there's a trick you learned earlier, but maybe you haven't thought about using it for this purpose yet. As I already showed you in the advanced course, among the blending modes, there's one called Lighten, and what this does is it only displays what is lighter from this layer compared to the layer below. And if you look, this is what creates that glowing effect here on our city. Obviously, this is way too strong, so it's worth reducing it to around 15 or 20. And if you look, this gives a really pleasant glow effect, but only on our highlights. And with that, this image is pretty much finished. As a final step, we could sharpen it, so I'll duplicate it again. But it's very important that I don't duplicate the Orton Effect layer, because that's a blurred layer, but rather our normal photo, which isn't blurred. So I duplicate that, move it up, and label it as Sharpening. Then we go to Filter, Other, High Pass. Set the value to 1, click OK, and for the blending mode, choose Overlay. We always do the same thing here. And now if we zoom in, you can see the before and the after. Beautiful. It has sharpened our image nicely. We also learned that this sharpens the sky as well, which we usually don't want to touch. So it's worth selecting the layer where the landscape is clearly visible. I click here on Select Sky. Well, it didn't do a very good job, but it doesn't really matter. We remove it with Command D. Now we create a mask for the sharpening, and with a black brush at 100% opacity, using a much larger brush, I simply paint over the areas where I definitely don't want to sharpen. And now if we look at the mask, this is what it looks like. So I definitely don't want to sharpen this upper part where the sky is. And with that, we're actually done. I'll bring in our original image and let's see where we started from. Here is our starting point. This is the original raw. We made a darker version as well as an earlier version for the nice details in the dark areas. And of course, we edited these. This is what the edited version looks like, from which we then fixed this part here, these shadowed areas, and then we corrected the highlights and afterwards replaced the sky. The sky was too dark, so we brightened it a bit with a curve, corrected the flaws in the image, and enhanced the church hill a little. And now we turn it on. And we also enhanced this peninsula a bit. And then we edited the whole thing in Camera Raw. We applied an Orton effect and sharpened the whole image. So that's how this picture became that picture. I hope this video was useful for you and that you learned something new from it. Don't forget, you can download the raw files and follow every step along with me. In fact, you can go through it multiple times because that's how you'll really learn quickly. But before I say goodbye, let's do one more thing. Let's crop the image. I usually crop to a 16:10 aspect ratio, so I come all the way down here to the bottom, and we can trim just a little bit from the right side as well. I don't want to cut the clouds in half here. It looks like our horizon might be a bit crooked. So let's check if that's the case. No, it seems my eyes were deceiving me. So I think I would crop this image roughly like this. I press Enter, and if we want to save it in a way that's internet compatible, then go to File, Export, Export as, and it's very, very important that Convert to sRGB and Embed Color Profile are checked. Everything else is optional, so I keep the copyright information. The size will be perfect for me like this. Export and desktop. Save. I hope we'll meet again in the next videos.